All right. When we last left off, we were trying to recover from the results of a rather unpleasant aquifer. And we've managed to get some public spaces dug out for our use. Not furnished yet, but dug out. Crafts dwarves, so we can start making those trade goods we promised to our other dwarves. Got our dining hall, temporary stockpile. This still needs to be walled up. This still needs to be walled up. This still needs to be walled up. These are all dried out. Okay. So we're getting there. Slowly but surely, we're getting there. Dug them all out. We just haven't actually walled them all up. Okay. And then this is the last level. We'll have to deal with the aquifer because the level above it can still leak down, which is what we're running into. It doesn't leak down here because we've excavated all of this. In order to not have it leak, say, out here in this fog of war area, we would have to excavate up here in mirror for what we do downstairs, which will get kind of annoying. So in order to actually mine any of this long term, what we'll end up having to do is set up a system where even if it starts to flood a little bit, there's going to be a drainage that it'll be able to flow out. So that's going to involve a staircase that leads down to the caverns so that if anything, and then out through a fortification so that if any water does start to build up, it just flows down the stairs and out of the fortress into the cavern where it'll drain off harmlessly. Okay, let's see. And then further down, we haven't really gone much. I've got some holes I have to fill in here where we were trying to spread the water out a little bit and not doing a very good job of it. And then we dried all of this out and we hit the caverns, but we did not leave ourselves, that's right, we did not leave ourselves a way to drain this into the caverns proper. So it looks like yeah, if we drill this wall out here and put a hole here and then put a fortification back in here, any water that ends up in this staircase will drain out into the caverns. That fixes any drainage problem we have here. Now that won't be a permanent problem anyway, but short term it's a good idea to have a fix in mind for it because this is all temporary fixes we were doing to try and work around the problem. This needs a staircase hole built back. And this pump is a nice gem, but it's not doing us any good in terms of moving water, so we can get rid of it. It served its purpose for that brief moment when we pumped that staircase out in order to reach the caverns. All right. So I am going to put rock mugs on repeat, but I want to put a profile on this. I want to have only our super skilled uh, dwarf doing this, and I kind of want to exclude him from anything else. So he sits there and cranks out super high quality, super valuable rock mugs for us, because we know that next year the dwarves are going to be back, and they are going to want our rock mugs, and we are going to have them in abundance with a high skilled stonecrafter. So we just got to get him working on that. Okay, so let's talk about something we didn't really have time to mess with the first day out, and that's custom labor settings here in uh, Dwarf Therapist. First off, I've just cleared all the labors on all my dwarves across the board. Everything. You don't have to do this, it's just for demonstration purposes. But what I'm going to do is assign these dwarves into labor roles, castes in a sense, that they're going to adhere to in terms of what jobs they perform on a day-to-day normal basis. Now, if I need them to do something else for some reason, then I'll have to make sure I'm assigning them to that task because otherwise they won't be set up to do it. So these two guys are actually intended to be miners. And if they're not mining, I don't care what other hauling they're doing, that's fine. Normally, we're going to do mining in spurts. So what'll happen is if they're off hauling something, I'll wait for a moment for that mining job to be done. But then right there, once they start mining, they're just going to do that whole batch of mining jobs in a row, and they're not going to go pick up a hauling job in the middle. So now that I've got those labors assigned, we create a new custom profession. Now you might notice I have a custom profession over here. I'll get to bridge bait in a second, but the crafter miner profession here, I call a crafter because it's a moodable skill. Miners can have moods. So this tells me that if I assign someone to this, that's the skill that they're going to develop foremost for purposes of what mood they're going to develop. If I make someone a weaponsmith, even dabbling for a while, that's what they're going to work on. Now, on the second guy, I just go back and tell him I want to have that same custom profession, and presto, they're miners. Now, that doesn't look like much at first, but when I sort them by profession, they suddenly have their own category now. I just set every hauling duty on every dwarf in the fortress except the two I had set as miners previously, with just a handful of clicks by setting them to my new profession, support hauler, which just has the hauling jobs on. You can, using custom professions, rearrange your dwarves on the fly in wide, far-reaching ways that allow you to have not just fine-grained control of your fortress, but very detailed and precise assignment of labor within your fortress. That's really a better description because I won't normally have this guy doing hauling. If I am hauling with him, I need to immediately turn it off if I want to use him. Furniture hauling is installing furniture. Refuse hauling is getting rid of garbage. Trade goods hauling is done in big batches in one go. Water hauling is what you're going to need if you're going to help feed patients or fill a pit. Realistically, he's probably not going to need to do any of those very often, and if he needs them, they're set. Now, if I need him to do other labors, right now he's going to go idle a lot of the time. I'd have to turn them on. So the trick here is I have my doctor profession set to have no hauling jobs, and then I turn his hauling on. If someone is injured and I need a diagnostician, I immediately turn a hauling off for all my doctors, and someone comes in running and takes care of it. Sandbags are furniture. And if these guys produce items and have nothing else to do, I want them to haul their items back to the stockpile. Trade good haul. Everybody does that when they need to. And cleaning. I want to make sure everybody handles that if we need to. And levers. Have to change that profession so we add levers to it. Now, in the world of Dwarf Fortress, glass is pretty much better for most purposes than clay. Um, if you have access to sand, you have access not only to an infinite supply of resources, but also to a resource in the form of glass that is more versatile than that of pottery. So I will typically lump my potters and glazers in with my glass makers and have my glass makers do the valuable work, with occasionally folks dabbling back into pottery as needed for whatever I might want. At the point that those become more diversified, or pottery is capable of doing things on a much grander scale that glass cannot, I would look back the other direction, and my ceramics workers might be primarily potters at that point. But in the current version, I think you're just better off to have uh, the one guy handling it. Now, there's a problem here I've noticed that I forgot to mention in the process of being all that distracted by all the other things. You'll notice a lot of my farmers here have dabbling farming, despite the fact that I really didn't have anybody doing any farming. What's going on there is our farmer, this dedicated farmer guy here, should have farming, and he'll need food hauling, and he'll need refuse hauling, and trade good hauling, and cleaning, and lever. Doesn't look like this guy has much in the way of skills either, but he is a beekeeper, so we'll go ahead and assign him to farming too. He can work on farming most of the time, and when they're between farming, I can start working on setting up a bee industry with this guy. Uh, Running an apiary is effectively an extension of farming by virtue of the way that bees are used, so I kind of justify it that way personally. Now, if they need a creative skill and they don't already have one, I could probably lump wax working in at that point and make Clinidev happy. But I know we do not yet have a wax worker in the fortress, only a beekeeper. Which reminds me, I will turn that on for him so that we have somebody with that labor no matter what. And these guys are going to be masons. So they'll take care of stone hauling, and they will push pull vehicles. Which reminds me, I need to turn that on for the stone crafters as well. Because otherwise they won't use wheelbarrows to move stone, and that's bad. Let's see. They will do refuse hauling. Everybody needs to be able to throw away garbage. If I call for garbage, any idle dwarf in the fortress should come running. I don't want to risk garbage laying around, throwing miasma everywhere. Let's see. And most of the rest of these guys aren't worth a hill of beans in terms of useful skills. Okay, yeah. I don't really care who operates the furnaces, so I'll usually let the haulers do those jobs. Let's take a look at our military skill. Got a good axe dwarf there in the hauler corps. A couple of marks dwarves. Temporarily going to call them bridge bait so we can pull them away. Bridge bait is what I use for dwarves who are infected with lycanthropy or who are uh, found out to be secretly necromancer cultists or who contribute to the evacuation of an artifact from my site. They get drafted into a special military unit, stripped of all their equipment, stationed under a bridge, and then somebody yanks a lever. The end. So we're going to use Zuntir here as a axe dwarf, I think, to lead a squad of axe dwarves. He looks like he's pretty well set up to train some folks already. How he managed to get there with such a mediocre strength, I don't know, but he's really good at it for somebody that's so puny. These other three guys will get equipped with crossbows and make them into hunters in the short term and crossbow dwarves long term. With three of them roaming around on the surface, you will have an abundance of folks out scouting. That's usually enough to keep them fairly safe. It won't stop something like a necromancer ambush happening on the edge of the map that gets them killed. There are limits. But for purposes of shooting animals and dealing with the average workaday threats, hunters will be fine. Now, once we start seeing invasions, I'll start pulling the hunters in and putting them on military duty instead of having them operate as civilian hunters. At that point, they'll do their training on an archery range rather than on animals. But in the meantime, while we're still early game, and normally I would have done this 2 seasons ago and not now, uh, we will put them to work as hunters to work on their crossbow skills and potentially provide a little meat as a bonus, though that's kind of optional. I'm not really looking for the meat. I'm looking for the easy training right now before I can build an archery range for them and get them trained properly. And then we've got several haulers who need to be doing all of the hauling work in our fortress. So our goal as fortress overseers in this short to medium term area is to get our crafters everything they need to start cranking out the stuff that they need to crank out. Now, for farmers, that means we need to have food production. For our noble doctor here, he's going to go back and be a hauler, so we're kind of ignoring him. Nobles are a special category under their own. Um, our stone crafters are going to need a stone stockpile nearby where they're doing their work and a place to deposit their goods once they're done. Our miners need something to be mining on. Either that's clearing out the aquifer or filling in holes or whatever. Our masons need to be making blocks and furniture. This is only what we're our third wave if you count our original seven. So original seven and 2 waves. But these guys we're going to eventually have to put into the military. I think they're the only real military folks we have. Now, at the moment, we don't have much in the way of uh, military facilities. We have basically no weapons other than the picks we've manufactured and the axes we've manufactured. So while we could cry out for Zuntir to defend us here, she's going to be hard pressed to do it all by herself with no armor and just a bronze axe. So let's go ahead and get our weaponsmith that we pulled out. Remember, we got this this weaponsmith here. What do we do? Where'd we put him? And I'm going to do it that way because we're going to have several different categories of smith, and they will not all work the same. But they're going to be all working side by side in the same areas. And I want to sort them kind of together when we do it. Okay, so for now, I'm going to put these guys back in the hauler core. I don't yet have enough haulers to get by without them. And we'll turn furnace operation on for those guys and off for him. Okay, and now we've started to get folks divided up into their roles a little bit. Let's get some nobles assigned. And we actually have a guy who would make a decent organizer, so let's get him doing that. And our doctor is now a chief medical doctor. And our smith has appraising skills, so we'll put him to work on that whenever he's not doing trading. And there's a record keeper. Okay, oh, he's the same guy. We don't want to do him the same thing. We could probably get away with that at first, but long term, that would be bad. So what do we got? Nobody else has any relevant skills. Okay, congratulations. You just became a book hound. Okay, so the way this is going to work is we have now assigned these 4 noble jobs that have significant impact on your fortress, but which are effectively little roles unto themselves. Your manager will manage work orders. We'll get to those in just a moment. He'll need an office. Our bookkeeper will manage our records, and he'll also need an office. That's what these little red require markers here are for. Chief Medical Dwarf is the guy who stands there at the front of the triage department and says, that guy gets sutured, that guy gets a cast, and that guy goes in a box. If the chief medical doctor doesn't see them, they don't get treated properly. So you need to have somebody doing that job. Your broker will handle all of our trading. We don't have anybody right now, I think, that has. Actually, I think we had an appraiser who came in. Our Smith had appraising, didn't he? So we have somebody there who can uh, trade goods and know what they're worth when we get our first trade caravan in the spring. So now we need to set up offices for our manager and bookkeeper, a lever complex for our bridge, because we still can't close the bridge out front. We have no military and no way to close the bridge. That's not a good start. Um, Once we've gotten our bridge closed off, then we're in good shape. At that point, we can at least, at the very least, seal ourselves up if somebody comes knocking and we're not ready to open the door. Okay, so now that we have a manager, we can assign a profile though. So remember, I got this rock mug going on over here. So we're going to set profile, and I forget which one of our crafters it was, but we'll set the skill on this to be not legendary because we don't want to go quite that high, but we want to go, say, a little lower than that down. If they have, say, accomplished, great. Let's see. So that's professional is 5. Proficient, I'm sorry, is 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, okay. So if they are at least a 10, they can do that job there, but nobody else. Now he should, I think, start cranking out mugs for us. Should see somebody come along, occupy this workshop, and start doing some mugs. Or he may be eating or sleeping at the moment, too, is the other possibility. Let's see. Stone crafters. One of them is making blocks, and the other guy is worshiping. So, yeah, we're not doing what we need at the moment. But they'll get there. They're a little backdated on prayers since it took us a year to get a damn temple up. Okay. Oh, not a bed. Table. And since we don't have any tables, it's planning mode time. An office for our manager, an office for our bookkeeper. This front area here will be for levers. We'll put in levers that we need folks to have access to quickly. This area is, roughly speaking, the center of our fort. The dining room is just upstairs, the bedrooms are going to be just downstairs, and most of the work areas are just above the dining rooms or will be down below the bedrooms. So everybody who's going to be passing through will be passing through this area. Additionally, everyone who passes through on the way to the tavern passes through this room. So they're going to be passing right by the area where we need this job done, or if they're on break in the tavern, they're not far from where the lever complex is. So when I need a gate pulled or a gate shut or a bridge raised or a magma trap activated, my hope is that the idle dwarves are not that far from where they're actually going to need to be to do the job. Now, the area behind the lever complex is intended for coffins and uh, monuments, burial halls, effectively. The reason that these are two tiles deep on each of the little niches is that if I need to bury someone and then wall it in, say for example, I'm concerned that we might have problems with necromancers in future, I can simply put the coffin in there and wall it up. No one will be able to visit it, unfortunately, but there's no way for anybody to get access to it. Or I could set up doors and lock them, or something similar, depending on what level of control needs to be done. Now, this room that's directly off of the chamber here is intended for guard dogs. If you take and station a chain here and a chain here, and you put a dog on each one, there's nowhere for this dog to be. It'll have to be in these 6 tiles on the left, and this dog will have to be on the 6 tiles on the right. There's nowhere for a dog to be that an animal or a creature or an invader coming through this area does not pass within 1 tile of a dog whose whole purpose is to spot it. So if there's going to be somebody in my lever chamber, I'm going to find out. Now, realistically, the only thing I'm doing this for is the really off chance at this point, because of the population we've got going through this area, the really off chance that a really highly stealthy gremlin gets all the way in through here and starts flipping levers, since I will at some point have levers that operate bridges in our magma, or in an obsidian farm, for example, that have to be operated in a specific order, or you junk the device. It's important that we make sure that the device is not being having its levers flipped when I don't want it to be. Likewise, if there's tantruming dwarves, I can try to seal this area off and keep them out of the lever complex. We still have to get our bridge linked up. I do believe we set ourselves some mechanics jobs to make mechanisms. I'm assuming those have completed because they look like they're all done here. Yeah, there's mechanisms. Oh, good. That means we can start a lever complex or a lever as soon as the complex is ready. Now let's go ahead and finish off our walls. Okay, let's see what our idle count does. Remember, our glassmaker doesn't have a lot to do right now. We're not making glass, so he may just be occupied with construction tasks and not much else if we gave him construction labor. Let's see what we got. The idle count needs to go up a little bit as we start to get more dwarves specialized. But there's going to be times like this where we need lots of labor en masse. Okay, take a look. Our farmer has nothing to do, and one of our stone crafters has nothing to do, if I'm reading that right. No job. Where are you at that you have no job? Really? You're right there? Nothing to do, huh? There we go. He was just confused, and then he figured it out. And then he went to party in the tavern. Okay, so we probably don't have anything to haul because we probably don't have anywhere to put anything at the moment. We're waiting on our miners to get some area cleared out here. So let's see. And another rash of dwarven labor will come along and pile blocks on the spots we've designated and get us a wall up around this aquifer level. It looks like our carpenter may have made the bins and then run out of jobs. In fact, we still haven't designated a carpenter now that I think of it. Well, none of these other guys are good at it, and our glassmaker isn't going to have a lot of else to do, so let's get him doing that. Till we're ready to actually have him doing glassmaking. Ah. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Now, we've got that wall all built up around there. Got that wall designated there. That should be the last of the walls we need to seal up the aquifer. So give them a second to get the walls finally up around our fortress here and keep the water out. And then we can work on getting the interior of this place into representing something other than a swampy mess. Got to check our supplies again. We're starting to get low on drinks again, and we're kind of low on meat. I need to check because not all plants are edible, even if they're brewable. So we may have brewable plants you can't eat. So this may not qualify us for non-starvation status here, if you will. We've created a bit of wealth here now already. So by summer, spring or summer of this coming year, I expect to have crossed 50,000 wealth. I'm going to start to look for attacks by lycanthropes, for example, and possible invaders coming up soon. And then sometime next year, I expect to eclipse the Titan attack requirements, and we'll start to have to worry about large beasts invading as well. So before that happens, we need to have a way to defend ourselves either militarily, which would be difficult if you didn't start with one and start training one immediately, or at least tactically and strategically by being able to keep intruders out. Seal the doors and block things off, since there's no way for them to siege our fortress properly with rams and towers, as it were. There's no way for them to get in if we simply close the doors and box ourselves in. Since we can produce all the food and supplies we need interior to our fortress, and we have an infinite supply of water in the form of our aquifer, we can theoretically survive indefinitely with no surface contact whatsoever. We literally require nothing at this point. It would be nice to get a few more waves of migrants so we avoid that whole there's only 3 families in this entire hole problem. But with a population of, say, 30 or 40 to start, it wouldn't be difficult for us to maintain that population indefinitely once we got it going. Okay, so they've got that done. Let's get our masons, who are currently working on blockaholic mode, to get us a few tables and chairs out of the way. And we'll go ahead and get all of our levers installed. This is more levers than we'll need for a long time, but there's no harm in getting our mechanics to install them all now. Oh, that's right. We haven't assigned a dedicated mechanic yet. And since I don't have anyone dedicated to it, hauler job. The haulers in my fortress perform much of the catch-all labor, stuff that doesn't have quality requirements, or which is better done en masse rather in parallel rather than having a serial single dwarf do it for skill. And when we dedicate a single dwarf to doing our mechanics work for purposes of skill and high quality mechanics, we'll still occasionally assign groups of people like this to do labor en masse when we need lots of stuff done at once, where it doesn't apply. Now we have to tell it we want the bridge outside to be linked up because otherwise it will link up one of our other bridges. And once that's done, this will allow us to uh, raise the bridge and seal ourselves up a bit more. We still don't have properly. One thing I like to do is once I've designated a lever for a purpose, I want to go back and put a note on it. So I place a note here. I tell it that the note of this is okay, these are notes for me for later. This lever will raise the bridge up there at the top on our box. It has a drop warning because if there's anything on it, it gets thrown when that raising bridge gets tossed. It has an intruder warning because if this bridge is left open when we don't mean it to be, you could let intruders in. And lastly, my personal favorite, any dwarf who happens to be standing in the tiles where that drawbridge forms a wall will instantly be crushed out of existence. I've actually had it happen on stream. Don't let your dwarves stand on the drawbridge when you're going to raise it. This allows me to come back to my fortress later, look at this giant lever complex with all these levers in it, and know exactly which levers are going to flip which bridges. Now, Control M will allow me to look at the links via DF Hack's Mechanisms tool. And this building hasn't been linked up yet, so it has no links. But here in a second, we'll be able to use that same trick to look at this and jump to the bridge it links. So using DF Hack, we don't need to have this note necessarily. We can actually jump to the item and know what we linked to. Okay, there we go. And we'll expand out our little custom stockpile here to make sure it fills out the available space and gives people places to store all those things that they've been sitting on, not doing any work. Furniture, for one thing, like doors. Probably wasn't the cat. Probably the fact you're coming across the drawbridge right in the middle of our busy period here. So let's remove these things and take everything indoors. Double check to make sure we didn't accidentally try to remove the bridges. Turn on brewing. Make sure we've got somebody to do the job. I don't think we've assigned a kitchen worker yet. Nope. Get some folks brewing some booze so that our dwarves don't dehydrate on us. And did we ever get our mugs started? And it probably wouldn't hurt to have some rock pots being run as well. I love the humble rock pot. The rock pot is a fantastic addition to the dwarven arsenal. It serves the same function as a barrel for most purposes, particularly the one that you usually care about the most, and that is food storage. You can store food in a rock pot just like you can in a barrel. That's some fine seaming. There we go. Now we've got some drinks. Okay, so let's get back up to our masons for a minute. We haven't ordered all the tables and chairs we need yet. Let them make some tables and chairs for us real fast. Now, as you can see, we've ordered these, and as planning mode already had them laid out, they've been just slapped into place once they're available. And an elven caravan. Now, we're not going to steal everything from the elven caravan. We'd really like not to go to war quite this early. For those of you who want to go to war with the elves, probably not generally a good idea to do it in your first season. It's not that the elves are necessarily powerful, it's just that they're simply numerous, and we are not. Not yet. Now, let's see what we have to trade, which ain't going to be much, unfortunately, because we haven't been making much to trade just yet. And you cannot offer the elves anything made of wood. So barrels are right out, unless you've made them out of metal. Generally speaking, anything in a barrel you don't sell you don't sell to the elves. So if I have barrels, I will generally work around them. My prepared meals will end up being stored in rock pots. I very rarely bring or create any sort of barrel after I embark. Rock pots for the win, baby. Rock pots can be sold to the elves just like everybody else, and they work the same as barrels, despite being slightly heavier. It does slow your dwarves down a little bit, but it's worth it to be able to turn around and go, "Oh look, I have this entire rock pot filled with all these exotic meals that we'll sell to you for this enormous price. Now sell me all your good stuff." They get a pot full of food. We get well, whatever we want. So let's see, what can we offer them though at the moment? Which isn't much. We don't have much. We've got some milk we need to turn into cheese too. I need to do that. Mm-hmm. We do have some mugs. We do have a few mugs. So let's do some mugs because we want to. The elves often have a few things that you're not going to get from the humans and the dwarves. Particularly, they have a tendency to bring more animals. So if you want to get exotic breeding pairs of things like bears or jaguars, the elves are a good source of that. And the second thing is, the elves tend to bring seeds from exotic foreign locales that you may not have access to on your site. If the elves bring you the seeds for sunberries, or they bring you the sunberries themselves, you can brew them, get the seeds, and start planting sunberries. Likewise, sometimes they will have whipvines or other valuable booze containing plants that we can barter for. And once we've acquired those seeds or those animals, we no longer require the elves per se, but it's nice to keep them around for things that they can bring you. Elephants, for example. I don't have access to elephants here, probably, but the elves might. And we'll take a look at the weapons category here and see what we've got. Let's see if we can maybe get rid of a couple of these things here that, I'm not really wanting to sell these per se, but if I hand them off to him and can get something better in return, then all to the good. We don't have much in the way of goods to trade at the moment. So let's see. We tell the depot that the trader is needed. Basically set the trader needed button. Light goes on, and our trader will arrive here shortly to trade. They're unloading, and it's going to take a while for all the goods we've asked for to be delivered to the trade depot. Anyway, you can see our dwarves bringing everything in. Here's the mugs, for example, and those little lines are the weapons, the picks and such that we've asked to be brought in. So those bronze items we brought with us, remember, we generated those on site. That's not... oh, good, he's already here. Perfect. Let's trade. Those bronze items we brought with us were made from the raw bronze that we brought. And as you can see, they're substantially more valuable than most other items. And this isn't with a super skilled... This isn't necessarily like a perfect outcome. You could have had a masterwork produced that would have been more valuable than even these. Um, if we allowed our weaponsmith to sit and grind on those bronze bars and make that all into weapons early on, you can produce a fantastic amount of trade goods by making bronze serrated discs, which are trap components and are extremely valuable. Not only can they go in your traps, but they can be sold for enormous quantities of gold. Not literally in this case, because we don't really want gold. Let's see. Food is always good. So we'll take any food they can give us. A dwarf, yeah, basically, yes. Dwarves never perform below adequate. Everything a dwarf does is always at least adequate. Okay, so they don't have squat for things I would actually give a fig about. Holy crap. Nothing. I mean, like, they've got some food, and that's, like, it. I don't care about their clothing. I don't care about these wooden weapons. I mean, I guess I can take their camel off their hands and butcher it for them. Their water buffalo. And the blue peahen can be added to our stable of birds, but not a good first showing from the elves. Not demonstrating why I keep them around. Okay, but their total value there is 810 dwarf bucks. So let's see. I could sell them. What are we up to? Trader loss is 90, so I've got to sell them a couple more valuable things here. And you can have the crummy bronze pick. Let's see, you're up to 260. You're going to want a little more than that. So here, take a couple more mugs. Yeah, there we go. At a 50% trader profit, where the whole value is 800 and the trader profit is 400, you're pretty much guaranteed that they're going to take it. This guy gets credit, skill credit. Our guy, our trader here, gets skill credit for making the trade. We don't care about that stupid bronze pick. The grazers they just brought us effectively have no value to us other than as meat. So pull them out of their cages and butcher them is going to be the next course of action for us. I'll need to get a butchering station set up and a tanning station set up so that we can process the hides. And we already have food storage space for them, so the byproducts they're made are not a problem. However, let's talk about miasma. So miasma is caused when areas that are not above ground, have things that rot. Nobody likes to sit around a pile of rotting chicken. Nobody likes to sit around the rotting byproducts of your butcher's workstations either. So you need some place to store the garbage, and there's a few ways to do this. Now, I typically use a garbage chute for the bulk of it. But in order to make sure you don't have a problem with it for your butcher's workstations, there's another little trick you can use. Remember, we've got these masons workshops here. I want to get rid of these. If necessary, I'll suspend these jobs and tell these guys, hey guys, you really, really got to get rid of these workstations. I need to do something with them. Um, we're going to punch a hole in this floor right here. And then down here on this floor, we'll put our butcher's workshop directly below that so that the center tile is directly below that hole. Because we've done that, it's going to be above ground and no miasma. Now, that's great for the stuff in the butcher's workshop, but it's useless for garbage. So the next thing we have to do is have a way to get rid of the garbage without creating a rotting, stinking mess. And so we exploit a couple of tricks to do this. First off, miasma can only move orthogonally, up and down, left and right, north and south, as it were. So it can't move diagonally at any time, whether that's up at an angle or on the same plane diagonally. It can only move in straight directions, like a rook in chess. If a rook could also go up and down floors. Space chess, I guess. But we can take advantage of this by creating a situation where dwarves will dispose of their garbage along a diagonal, allowing them to put the garbage in the hole, but not allow the miasma to get back out. So we'll show you how to make the specialized garbage chute. So first, let's figure out what the hell our masons are doing that's keeping them so busy they can't disassemble our two workshops here. Oh, they still haven't finished all those thrones I was making because I had it on pause while I've been talking. That's what they're doing. No wonder. We've got to let them finish. I need some of those. I need that furniture for not just our dining room, but our tavern needs furniture. Our masons need some skills so we can get some decent quality statues out of them to start decorating the uh, temple bookshelves for the library. See, that's the first problem. Empty food storage item. Now, we have enough drinks to get by for a bit, but we need to get some empty food storage items. And in that case, that means rock pots, remember. I don't want to make barrels. So we're just waiting on rock pots to be done here. Now, I could just put them on repeat, but I don't want an overabundance of them. And so we're going to get to work orders here in just a moment. But we're not quite there yet. Do I want to do? No, not yet. I don't have enough dwarves to start setting up work orders to stand, basically. Work orders allow you to automate production in your fortress, but there's not really enough labor here yet to start worrying about automating vast quantities of it just this moment. We have to keep track of a few minor things here, but we're not yet to the point where we're micromanaging everything, so we don't necessarily need to start having the dwarves take over that load, as it were. I want to make sure my dwarves have plenty of idle time so they have chances to visit the tavern and drink, worship, listen to poetry, recite poetry, whatever they're doing. We want to make sure they have some idle time. Dwarves that don't get idle time will start to get unhappy with us. The fact that we didn't have those buildings for a long time is actually a really bad thing, but workable. We haven't had anybody go mad yet, thankfully. So we've done our trade. There's nothing else we need from these guys. We're done with them. Let's get our crafter off of trading. He no longer needs to be here. He can go back doing other things. They're not going to bring us anything new. They've already unloaded everything that was valuable. So we took our stuff and gave it to them. They took our stuff and gave it to us. Done. Trade's finished. So, don't yet have any containers. Okay, so I'm planning for tables and chairs for our tavern here. I'm not too worried about our god botherers. Just having this big room up here gives them plenty of shrine value. But tables and chairs make a tavern go round. If you ain't got nowhere to sit and eat, what the hell are you doing there? Now, this section in the middle we're eventually going to turn into not just our barracks, but it'll double as a guild hall. That way we can have external visitors come in and give and receive demonstrations, and we can at the same time train our military. They can all be having fun in one big room together. Don't ask me how it works. They're just really good at it, I guess. The goal being, though, that we can keep our security force nearby where all of the, let's call them, semi tolerated invaders are. And it should allow us to provide more than enough value in each of these rooms to meet their respective thresholds at the same time. Now, I want to have a couple of wheelbarrows set up, so I need to go talk to my carpenter and get him to do that. And wheelbarrows are necessary for a stone stockpile because moving stone is heavy. Wheelbarrows are perfectly happy made out of wood, so we're just going to do that real quick. Keep in mind, our dwarves are sharing a bed about 2 to 1 here, so we've still got 19 dwarves and 10 beds. That's not a good ratio. We want that down to 1 dwarf per bed in its own bedroom, away from prying eyes. Nobody wants to see it. Hey, hey, welcome aboard, Jimmy. Now they'll start collecting that stone at a reasonable pace. That will keep our stonecrafter busy making mugs instead of fetching stone from the far side of oblivion. Double check, see what we've got left in the wagon. Just some thread and some sand. Yeah, need to get the thread out, make sure that's out. And then, not too worried about the sand. The plaster, we've already started to move out, so there's obviously a place to store it all. Okay, good. Ah, I must have to change its setting. I'll have to take a look at it blind. So we need to, we've got our stonecrafter busy. We need to, so you guys have got me distracted now. I was thinking. Damn right. 37 days, baby. 37 days in a row. The charity train has no brakes. Nuts. What was I getting ready to do? Okay, I need to check on the stockpile. Oh, right, the migrants. Now that's more like it. Now we're starting to get a sufficient quantity of slave labor to get our work done. Now, the good news is we've actually got a better doctor here than we started with by far, a couple of them, in fact. Like our doctor just became the third apprentice kind of situation. Another good stone crafter, a decent wood crafter who can start making good stuff and not freak out when an archer breaks one of his bolts. Farmer, a couple of herbalists, a couple of better brewers, no kitchen worker yet. Somebody's going to get to do it by default. Couple of butchers, no smiths, no gem setters or ceramics workers, couple of 1, 2 mediocre cloth workers, and suddenly we have 3 beekeepers out of nowhere. Okay, so still no carpenter. Okay, so let's take our guy here and make him into our dedicated carpenter. Because the difference between the 0 here and the 1 here is not really much. Not wood cutting, though. We want our carpenter indoors and safe. Now, wood crafting and bone carving. Let's talk about those for a moment because they deserve a bit of a special mention. Uh, when a dwarf creates a masterwork and that masterwork is subsequently destroyed, that dwarf gets a little unhappy. Wood crafting and bone carving are most known for producing ammunition, that is to say, crossbow bolts. And crossbow bolts have this amazing propensity to get used roughly and be destroyed. So here's the rub. Dwarves who start out and only have a masterwork or two get really unhappy even if it's just ammo. There's a reduction in the penalty for ammunition, but it's still there. Whereas if you have a guy that's really skilled, he can crank out a few, say, 100 wooden trinkets, and you could sell those on down the road, and those masterworks are effectively locked in. And it's a percentage of his masterworks that he gets pissed off about. So a few bolts that get smashed in combat is nothing against those few hundred that are still out there, or a few thousand that are still out there, and the few hundred additional wooden trinkets that you've sold on down the road. So we can effectively insulate them from the effects of their masterwork destruction by having them produce a bunch of masterworks that won't be destroyed, and by producing an enormous quantity of masterworks, making each one's destruction minimal. Welcome aboard, guys. So let's pick out our few specific guys here. Okay, so let's get these guys customized properly. Our middle guy here is going to need to do item hauling. And everybody does refuse. And everybody does trade goods. And cleaning. And levers. Item hauling means he'll haul his own items away to the stockpile if he needs to. He'll keep doing work if he can, but if everybody else busy, there is $10 will buy you the name of a dwarf. 50 will get you the name of one of my starting 7. That's not just for this fortress, boys and girls. That's for all 37 days. Oh, see, I haven't had a chance to actually get anybody named, I confess. I've been, let's just say we've been a little distracted by our aquifer problem. we've just now gotten our first sizable migrant wave. We've went from what 19 to now I think we've got now like 40. So yeah, now we can start to look at things where our dwarves are going to have labor under control for a moment here. Okay, so let's get that committed. Bear with me. Bear with me. We've got so much catching up to do. And well, he'll do it all for us, boys and girls. We're going to set him to work on carpentry and get him cranking out bins. And he's going to make bins for a long time. But he'll also make some bolts on us side here so we can keep him busy. Hey man, I will be here all 37 days. Each and every night. Well, I can't say night because occasionally I may have to do it during the day. We'll see. Let's see what else we got here. Brewers. That's what I was getting ready to do. Those are the guys. Now, we're kind of doubling up on a few things here because these tasks will get done in batches and they will tend not to consume enormous quantities of labor. We're going to set up a number of butchering stations, and basically, butchering will get done in one mass and then be done. And the tanning will get done in one mass and it will be done. And the leatherworking will be done when we need it. But generally speaking, these things are not going to overlap. And these are not crafting skills that I'm particularly concerned with, so I need some dwarves to do them, and I don't want to have a large number of dwarves doing them. So, bone carving will spread out. We won't make bone arrows normally. If I do, it'll be bone bolts here and there, and we'll recover a lot of those on the archery range. But by spreading these guys out, tanning will get them a crafting skill, and leatherworking will get them a crafting skill, and bone carving will give them a crafting skill. None of those produce particularly valuable artifacts, but they all produce things that I want to use at least at some point in my fortress. Leather armor makes great stuff to be able to hand out to your uh, dwarves as cloaks, for example. Uh, you can, I guess, theoretically, give your dwarves bone armor, bone bolts. We'll spend a lot of time using up our bone to make bolts long term, so that we can burn it on the archery range. But I don't want to have those jobs being done by some legendary crafter who might potentially lose his mind down the road, because frankly, those jobs just aren't all that important to me, and I don't want to risk somebody important for them. So we'll let the guy that feeds the pigs take care of it. So what else we got here? Still no dedicated mechanic. Still not much in the way of dedicated smiths. We still don't have a good dedicated engraver. So we're going to have to pick somebody here before much longer. Get a few people started on smoothing terrain so they can build up their skill. Okay, so these guys just became kitchen workers. Still not much in the way of military dwarves. Couple more marks dwarves, but not much else. Okay, so let's get ourselves some basic crossbows, some basic quivers, and some basic bolts to equip a few hunters with. Um, we've got all this labor running around now. It's time to start thinking about a military and properly boxing ourselves in so that we can defend ourselves until the military is properly trained. Not a big fan of sacrificial dwarf charges. Okay, now we do have. Ah, right. There we go. Let's get the masons a place to work. Get this floor dug out and get that floor repaired. And that one's already dug out. Good. Reminds me, I forgot to turn ores and special stone off in this stockpile. I only want generic stone to be used for stone mugs. I don't want to have them making limonite limonite ore mugs. All right. So we got them set up. Let's get them off the surface now. And with no mason's workshops left here on the surface, that job will be taken downstairs. These blocks will eventually be recycled down into the stockpiles. Oh, that's right, the elves. We already took care of them. They didn't have anything we really wanted. Just some food, and we're all good. Okay, and they're still going to disassemble those. Come on, guys. Get it done. You never want to have to build coffins, but realistically speaking, this is Dwarf Fortress, and if you don't build them in advance, you're just screwing yourself. And we should talk about Auto Butcher about now, I think. Let's see, did they get those work stops gone? Yes, yes, good. Okay. Now, there is a bit of a moment where we have to stop and think about this for a second, because to open this back up and produce the sort of pasture spaces underground that I would have used in prior streams is actually somewhat problematic in this case, because we're going to need to crack the seal on one of these and then dig out another aquifer-laden chunk of dirt and then seal it back up as well in order to have an underground grazing space. So, let's see here. We can do it there, and we can do it down here. What do we got in terms of materials? What is each one of these? I think the one above is sand, and that's probably better for us here. That's loamy sand, and this is yellow sand. Okay, so yeah, this is better for us. We get the white sand up here dry though, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so that's not even a concern then. All right. Well, since this is where we're planning to put our animal processing workshops, and that gives us 2 floors of pit for our moat, I think we can make that work. Okay. Yes, I think we can make that work. Okay. Let's let our kitchen workers get their butcher's workshops up so we can put Auto Butcher to work if we need to. That's part 1. Now, part 2 is we make sure we've got enough room between where we're going to expand outward and where we're going to put our garbage chute, and we do. Let me check the... Let's talk about workshops for a moment. When I do this with my tile sets, you'll see that some of these tiles are dark and some of them are light. The reason that there's a difference there is that the light tiles are walkable by dwarves, meaning that they can walk on these 5 tiles here, but they're blocked by the dark tiles on the edge here and this one on the middle here. So when I put this, say, in a corner, it matters, because if, say, this corner didn't exist and I wanted this to be passed through here, a dwarf could pass through here. He could walk through the workshop into this space and out this hole. But if the door was up here, and it was the same situation with this corner being the door, our dwarf is blocked. He comes into the workshop, but then he can't walk through either of these tiles, and he can't walk through our wall here, so it's blocked off, and he can't get through the door at all. This matters if you're going to put workshops into small spaces, and it matters if you're going to dig tunnels that branch off from the 9 tiles that a workshop occupies. So, now that we know that that's safe, and we're not going to block ourselves with our workshop, we can go over here and dig this out. One tile here to give us a little bit of a break here. We'll put a door in this space. And then one tile that actually comprises the garbage chute. And our miners are busy downstairs at the moment, but they'll be along here momentarily to get that excavated for us, and we'll get it set up. Check on our supplies again. Okay, is our office up yet? Yes, it is. So, we are setting up for an office. Now, our record keeper and our manager require nothing more than a chair to comprise their office. You literally can take a chair, call it an office. That's all they need. Neither one needs anything other than a place to sit while they're stamping things. So, we're going a little above and beyond by giving them even a table and a chair. But frankly, I've never seen an office yet that didn't have a desk to work at, so call it a needless extravagance, but we're going to do it anyway. Let's go downstairs a little bit here. Their miners are starting to finish up with that room. Let's check on our masons. And as soon as they get these rooms dug out below here, we're going to use one for jewelry and then one for storing the finished goods. Our jeweler's workshops will be right next to where we're going to produce our trade goods here, because frankly, we're going to be cranking them out. And the reality is, if anybody gets in this far, we're probably screwed anyway. Aha! Our first mood. Shame it's a possession, but we'll deal with it. What do we get? What's he going to do here? Crafts Dwarf's workshop. Okay. Well, at least he didn't go far. That's the good news. The bad news is he's not telling us. Let's see. Stone, rock, gems probably is an issue because we may not have any cut. Stone, rock, gems shining is probably cut gems, and tree is logs. We have logs. Okay, so we have logs, we have stones, we do not have cut gems. Let's go downstairs, and our miners are just now finishing that up, so it works out perfectly. Wonderful. Just trying to see if there's anything else we want to include here, and it probably wouldn't hurt to include figurines, amulets, scepters, crowns, rings, earrings, bracelets, totems, toys, musical instruments. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, and those are other items that you might conceivably want to decorate for sale, basically, or for keeping in our tavern in the case of the musical instruments. Um, Everything else can be decorated and sold on down the road, right? So these are good things to keep. Now, we then put all those things in bins. So the goal here is gems get brought over here, they get cut down by our guys, stored, and then they get moved across the hall and decorated on this side. So this side is going to do all of our cutting, and this side is going to do all of our setting. So to speak. We're not actually going to link the stockpiles in this case because, frankly, if the manager assigns all the cutting jobs over here, I don't want to have to disambiguate it for them. Oh, and we need more bins. Lots more bins. More bins than my carpenter has ever been instructed to make in his entire life, since he's not a carpenter until he arrived on site. But today he is a carpenter, and today he will make bins. Tomorrow he will make bins. The day after that, he's going to still be making bins. Okay, so now our dwarves have excavated that area we're going to use as a garbage chute. We set up the zone. We mark it as a garbage dump, and we're done. That's it. Dwarves will enter from here. step into the garbage dump, and then, due to a quirk of dwarven logic, since they are standing adjacent to a pit, they will throw the garbage into the hole, which is fine. That's exactly what we want them to do. The garbage will fall to the bottom of the hole, be marked as refuse and forbidden, and then sit there till it rots away to nothing. The dwarf will turn around, walk back out, the door will close. No mess, no fuss, no stink, no clean. The door is really optional, mostly for decoration purposes at this point, because the miasma, again, cannot move diagonally to enter this square, so it also, again, can't move diagonally to get out of this square. And so this little airlock here, in a sense, keeps the smell down. Okay. Let's see what's sitting above where we're going to make all those holes. Some blocks, and a pick that I'd really like to get inside. Blocks and a pick. And blocks. Cool. Is our stockpile down here just completely full of... Yeah, blocks. That's what I figured. We need more bins. Lots more bins. An ocean of bins. Tolkien's original draft of the War of the Five Kings had them all fighting over bins. Every bin our little carpenter here cranks out is going immediately into use, so let's do something. Now, there is one area. Look, I'm kind of making a joke with the bins thing, but the reality is, in Dwarf Fortress, as with many colony simulators, the reality is that if you don't attend to your logistics needs, everything goes to shit. It doesn't do it right away. It takes a minute. But sooner or later, somebody's running for stuff, and your whole society is effectively grinding itself to a halt every second of every day because of the additional travel time necessary for your fortress to operate or your colony to run. Um, there's a reason why the modern world employs so many truck drivers. And that reason is logistics wins wars. If the things you need ain't getting to the place where they're needed, that unmet need is getting you screwed. So, in addition to those bins that we desperately need, we also need a handful, not many, just a handful of barrels. Now, I know I said I don't make barrels, and that's generally true. I don't really make barrels at all. But there's one exception where barrels are actually needed, and that would be there are certain workshops that cannot be constructed. Tony does not allow them to be constructed from a rock pot. You must have an actual barrel item. Now, it doesn't have to be a wooden barrel, it can be a metal barrel, is fine, but it has to be a barrel. So when we go to make a dyer's workshop or a soap workshop or an ashery, they require a barrel as part of the construction, and we have to have barrels to do that. Um, that basically will allow us to get those workshops up and positioned, and so we'll have a floor here that's dedicated basically to the use of wood. Let's see, did we get... Not yet. I don't think we set ourselves up a... That's the other thing we need to do. Go in here to our gem cutting and make sure somebody has the job. Because we don't care who does it at this point, but somebody better damn well do it, or this guy that's going to do his mood is going to lose his mind. Remember, we're not looking for skilled, high-quality gems here. We just want gems in bins. So, tell 20 dwarves that they're all now jewelers, temporarily. Just long enough to get jewelers' workshops set up and a few gems cut. Low-quality stuff. Cut stone, doesn't matter. Just get some gems cut. Because that will get our happy dwarf off and running. So let's see here. We'll do it out of... Bone opal isn't particularly valuable, I don't think, so why not cut those? And we'll just cut all the bone opal. We may only have one, but we'll see if we can get him going with just some bone opal. This being an artifact, you could do the most valuable one, but realistically, this one is going to be something with wood and something with stone and something with a gem, so I'm thinking a ring, maybe. It ain't going to be a weapon or something I am going to overly concern myself with. And there he goes. There we go. Okay, so now he's over here at his workshop grinding away, and off he goes. Now I'm hoping we're able to keep our little stonecrafter here nice and occupied. If he's been cranking out mugs, come fall, we're going to be able to import a huge quantity of metal bars and gems, we hope, we hope. You laugh, but the first post, one of my most highly rated posts ever, was a simple description of chain stockpiles designed to avoid seed quantity spam. It's a big deal. Now that we have a bridge, we can get rid of these ramps. They are no longer necessary, and they are allowing access to our fortress by folks who come right along the front here, which is bad. We want folks to be forced to come across the bridge, not simply walk into the fort. It's not access control if it's not controlling access. What do you get? A figurine. Ooh, a figurine. Yay, good for you. Okay, let's take a look at that, I guess. Oh, nuts. One time I go to use it. Oh, that's right, it's L. I use this key so rarely that I don't actually remember what it is. A phyllite figurine of Uzolak color. A dingo woman. Laboring. He was inspired by a dingo woman of yore. No accounting for taste, right, guys? No accounting for taste. Still need the bins. That's our holdup. The bins, the bins, the bins. And we're micromanaging this stuff a little. So we're getting to the point where we're just about ready to start kicking in work orders. I was hoping we were going to catch up here with our rampant overpopulation of blocks in this stockpile. I think what we're going to have to do is designate a different stockpile for the blocks. I'll allow soap bar. These other bars have uses somewhere else in the fortress. Soap, if it's not in the hospital, has to be kept somewhere, and this is as good a place as any. The rest of the bars need to be kept near where they're being used. Pearl ash and potash all have uses in farming and such. Um, Coal is used in your forges for obvious reasons. Um, pearl ash is used in clear glass too, I think. Um, Soap, though, is basically this is a backup stockpile for our hospital, and then otherwise it's blocks. Blocks are only used in construction. That's the only purpose for this stockpile. It's construction materials. And we will set this stockpile up to take from our generic catch-all stockpile that is rapidly filling up with blocks. This is going to chew up some labor. And now all of those blocks will be moved down here. And we can go upstairs and remove blocks from this stockpile so that they stop being added and other items can make it in. Now, for right now, we don't have any other stockpile for those other things, so we're just going to catch them here. But the blocks and the soap bars can go to their final stockpile and no longer be occupying our space here. This stuff will start to clear out, and the stuff that's been holding in workshops will start to filter in. It will chew up a bit of dwarf labor to move these things between floors, but we were going to do it at some point anyway. And this will allow other things to start making it in. Now, let's go see if we've got free barrels still to do that thing we were trying to do before. Now, I'm actually hoping we don't have to use the wood furnace too much because it's a really inefficient way to make fuel, but this floor processes wood, with the exception of the dyer's workshop, which doesn't, and the soap maker's workshop, which doesn't. These workshops all use wood. The soap maker's workshop uses it indirectly in the fact that we use wood to make lye, and then we use the lye in the soap, and we're going to store the lye here, so yeah, I might as well have it here. The dyer's workshop, I'm not going to dedicate a whole floor to dyeing. I usually end up with one of them, and I don't normally even bother with dyeing at all. It's completely optional. You're going to make a fantastic quantity of dwarf bucks just off regular goods. You're not going to need to dye them unless it's, say, to gild the lily with respect to your own military units and put them all in matching uniforms or the like. But I like to have the workshop on hand, so we build one. Wood, wood, wood. And we will give this one some wheelbarrows. Logs are not super heavy, but it doesn't hurt to have a wheelbarrow to move things if you're not the strongest dwarf. It also cuts down on the number of dwarves who will actually service this stockpile, meaning there will only be 3 at a time. We made ourselves 10 wheelbarrows, so that works. And we'll get rid of these workstations. They are in the way. We need to get our hospital up. Yeah, this is a good spot. On second thought, no, it's not. It's too low. This will do, though. All right, let's give our miners a second to finish all this off, because this is a bit of work we're going to have them do here. Once they've got this initial well area set up, we can talk about what we're doing here and why. But the gist is, we're going to use this room as a hospital, and it needs ready access to water. And that means we're going to put water as close to it as we can. So we're going to center our wells right there adjacent to our hospital. Now, what we're aiming to do is all of these staircases down here provide access back up to where this access staircase is going to be here. I haven't finished that. I need to do it real quick. We're going to mine out one little tile here. Oops. Now that I'm thinking about it, that won't work the way we want it, but we can make it work. Okay, there we go. Yes. I want to make sure that we don't have a, well, let's just call it an unfortunate flooding event. Oh, right, the ones in the cages. Kept promising to tell you guys about that, didn't I? No, not that one. So here's the harsh reality of life in my fortress. Pathfinding is precious. I only have so much space for dwarves, so much space for animals, and unfortunately I can't get rid of invaders until they actually show up, so I have to leave some space for them. So, anything that's not on my approved animal list or part of some exotic war breeding program is slaughter bait. That means every horse, bunny, llama, donkey, mule, water buffalo, if it ain't one of the animals I brought with me, sheep, pigs, dogs, cats, bird of a particular type, that being the blue peahens, blue peacocks, then if it ain't on that list, it's slaughter bait. It just goes into the meat larder. That's all there is to it. I have no use or value in any of those other animals. They're simply chewing up pathfinding cycles. Now, at some point, we may come into possession of something like, say, a bear or a jaguar that I may think we can use for a potential war animal program. And that, sure, yeah, okay, fine, we'll keep those. But I'm not keeping every grazer that wanders in and decides it wants to stay just because it found a meal under our roof. My pathfinding cycles are restricted. So, now we've told them to butcher the hell out of all these animals. That's great, except we have nowhere to process the hides. So, we need to make sure we get a couple of tanners' workshops up, and we'll just throw these up here on the surface for a moment because we don't really care if the leather goes anywhere as long as we get somebody to actually do the tanning. We're good. We'll go ahead and put these up here. And we'll let that run. There's probably going to be a fair bit of butchering going on here in the near term. Ah, music to my CPU's ears. Through get lucky and actually tan a hide enough to get himself a potential crafting skill and get added to the ranks of the kitchen workers forever. Now, with all that extra labor, someone should be along momentarily to get us a tanning workshop up, because we need one soon. Time is racing, and we have no way to tan our hides. And a lot of blocks to move because we blew up those masons workshops right here. There we go. And they should automatically get started tanning, I'm hoping. Let's, come on guys, are we tanning hides here? Not tanning hides? Why are we not tanning hides? Let's tan all the hides. See, this guy's got the right idea. He's tanning hides. Now, we have to do something on our own. We don't yet have our little sunlight chute that prevents all this stuff from rotting on the middle of our fortress. Well, Lamund, I could show you, but, well, they charge for that kind of stuff on the internet. Okay, so we're going to go through and get rid of most of these items, especially the stuff that can rot, and chuck it in our, and designate for being chucked into our garbage chute. Um, Now, some of these things can be used for other things like crafts. That's fine. We'll get there eventually. But right now, I'm more concerned with getting the rotting stuff out and done so that we can uh, not have to worry about miasma being generated right here all over our farm, or right here all over our farms. However, I will say our haulers are doing a fantastic job of moving away most of the rotting the stuff that would rot. Any food items that are produced, meats and fats and prepared eyeballs and horse liver, whatever falls out of whatever animals you butcher. Um, all has the propensity to rot, and if your haulers don't haul it away to a food stockpile relatively quickly, you'll end up with giant stinking clouds emanating from your butcher's workshops, which we're mostly going to avoid because most of that stuff's already moving. The hooves I'm getting rid of, even though they can be used for some crafting skills, I believe. Horn, kind of the same thing. The skulls can be made into totems. We'll hang on to those for now. Hair has no real value to us. Cartilage and nervous tissue, gone. The bone can be made into bolts for training purposes. But so far, they are doing a fantastic job of keeping up now. And we are just going to produce an enormous quantity of meat by this process. All those animals we've been hanging on to for all this time, for no particular reason other than I just didn't have any way to deal with them, are now going to meet their untimely end and produce resources. So now we've gone down and absolutely just massacred our animal population, which is what we wanted to do. Get rid of all those starving animals I hadn't actually assigned to pastures because they had come in a cage and we never bothered to pull them out. Shame on us. Shame, shame on us. Looks like we need to make another run at the drinks real fast. Getting a little low again. That's all those excess tanning jobs I pushed in there. It's just clearing out the queue. Wanted to make sure we had enough jobs to cover any we had already produced. And now they're cranking out some drinks, so we're good there. Let's go on down here. Still moving this stuff out. There is a lot of stuff to move. We also don't want to store goblets, musical instruments, toys, figurines, amulets, scepters, crowns, rings, earrings, bracelets, and totems in our catch-all stockpile. Remember, we have a stockpile for those things now, so they can go downstairs and be stored there. Likewise, we can get rid of all the gems in this stockpile. They don't need to be in there at all. Just disable that whole category. Let's see, what else do we have stockpile for already? None of this other stuff yet, but we're gaining on it with a quickness. It's time to start talking about where we put everything. Organization, organization, organization. So let's see if our wall is here. Guess now that I come to think of it, all of this stuff in the middle is already mined out and replaced, so I don't have to worry about excavating more than I meant to. Oh, darn it. There we go. Under cat attack at the moment, she's climbed onto my shoulders and laid down. All right. So our goal here is we're going to keep our workshops in the center here to do the animal processing, and we'll simply set up pasture spaces in the outside. Now to make that work, let's talk about where we're going to cut them off. Let's just do ourselves a little segmentation here. And then we can put the doors in and have 4 separate pasture spaces, birds, grazers, pigs, dogs and cats that are excess. We can even go upstairs and use some of this excess space up here to do the same thing, as long as we keep the same form factor, because what we're running into now is this is the wall here. I want to make sure I go no further out than right here, because these walls can be dug out and replaced, but I can't go any further out than that and still have a moat that descends past this level. So if I want to use that space for anything else, for example, I'd have to figure out how to do it. The other way we could do this is simply invert it and make it all one giant pasture space and say just wall up this area here in the middle and put a door on it and call it good. Put some nest boxes in some areas and just let the animals free roam. We don't care. That's perfectly viable. Um, in the case of things like pigs, I would eventually move them out and use this as a proper grazing area. The cats and the dogs and the pigs can all be moved to areas where there's no grazing required. The birds, likewise, I'll move them to an area where there's no grazing, and then we can have 4 grazing pastures for, say, sheep and pigs, and then maybe we end up with elephants or something. Who knows? Probably not elephants. I probably wouldn't try to keep elephants in the ground like this, but not without a giant, huge pasture space. But we'll see. Now, our well. We've got all our access staircases dug out. Good, good. Let's go ahead and punch the holes for the wells. There are going to be 4 wells in this chamber so that there's never a wait. Realistically, the notion that 4 dwarves are all needing to use the well at the same time is really unlikely. And since our water supply is right below that, there's a minuscule delay where the well is actually in use before it hits the water and comes back up. So it's really unlikely that, yeah, okay, good. You load your stuff up and we'll sell you a few mugs. It's really unlikely that they're going to. And that will leave like little ramps right here. Now, let's talk about why we've done this well that we've done it. The staircases mean if somebody falls into the well for whatever reason, dodges, freaks out, sees a spider, panics at their own shadow, the ghost of their dead mother comes back and frightens them, whatever. They fall in the well, they at least have the chance to climb the staircases out. They don't have to be able to swim to actually escape. Um, this theoretically gives them at least the best chance they can to escape through this access tunnel that I've provided them. The wells themselves are going to sit here, and the water will be at this level, but it will not be at ground level. The ground level is actually 2 levels below that, and the intent is that even if there's a decrease in water level for some reason, we're not drawing water from the lowest level of the water. That is to say, if these wells were drawing water from way down here where at the bottom is, any well that does that will come up with mud in the bucket. Mud speckled water ain't going to help your hospitals have disinfected wounds. So we don't want that. And that's not a problem for us because our well is going to fill up once and never be we have to worry about it again if we don't want to. Now, as a rule of thumb, I would generally suggest digging an access that allows the water to drain out. No, let's do this differently. Okay, so what we're going to do is send our miners down to the bottom of the well and excavate this small little chamber off to the side. And we're going to build a drawbridge that fills the entire room and seals it right here. So this room is going to be empty most of the time and sealed off. In the event that we needed to actually drain the well, what we would do is lower the drawbridge so the water comes flooding in, and then run the drawbridge a few times and atom smash the water out of existence. Actually, I take it back. We're going to put the drawbridge over here so it drops this way, and we'll just leave it open. Um, we'll just get the additional water volume that way. It doesn't hurt anything. And it'll actually fill better later on, I think, if we have to refill the or redrain it. I think we'll get better water flow that way. So let's do it that way. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. Now, this is a quirk in Dwarf Fortress physics. This drawbridge going up and down in this room will actually smash the water completely out of existence. Yeah, I know, that's not how it works in the real world, but welcome to Dwarf Fortress. By crushing the water out of existence in this fashion, water will flow in to replace it and effectively drain out of the well. You can use this to drain the well just fine. In order to do it with a modicum of safety, you should probably make these into fortifications instead of leaving them open. But frankly, if I'm activating the atom smasher at the bottom of the well, anything in the well is going to get mulched, and I probably didn't care about it in the first place. Because there's always room for pudding. Okay, so we'll get our pudding stone bridge, which will line up right here, and it'll be up. The water will come flooding into our well, and it'll fill up this chamber, and it'll backfill the rest of the well. Now, the question is then, how do we see? That's a really bad, depressing thing to think about. So let me segue into that, Clinidev, since you talk about atom smashing being the only functional way to deal with junk. Um, that actually raises an issue you see in a lot of roguelikes, the terminal-based roguelikes, the older stuff. Um, if you go back and you play Angband or Moria, it's referred to as the too much junk problem. When you have items that are technically of value but are of so little value that you don't care about them and all they serve is to populate your lists and clutter up your game, you have too much junk. And a lot of these games have adapted by removing these older, technically valuable or minimally valuable items from their database or allowing the player to filter them from view automatically, so that they are technically there but not seen or touched. Uh, Dwarf Fortress just needs to, I think, to consider consolidating some of its lists in some cases. I'm not really sure what else to do. You can talk about atom smashing things, but realistically, why isn't there a burn pit for clothing? Or Why can't we toss all our refuse on a charnel heap and just set it all ablaze? You can sell it, but selling it poses its own issues in that it requires player effort to deal with it when it's really not something that should be at the level that a player should be concerning with themselves with most of the time. Um, you can kind of get around that with some of the DF hack tools, setting up stockpiles for worn clothing that are basically auto trade goods. But it also chews up dwarven labor. The reality is, though, when you stop to think about it, a lot of the things we're selling basically devolve back down to selling stone. If my dwarf is hauling a stone to up here to be made into a mug and sold, the only change is that I'm increasing the value and decreasing the weight. It's still going to end up as an incredible amount of clutter. There really is no good way around it. Okay, so let's talk about wells and flooding for a moment. Remember, we mentioned flooding earlier, and I dug this sort of. Yeah, that's right. Which also means in a lot of cases tripling the amount of dwarven labor necessary to drag it to the trade depot to sell it. Um, so now we've got this well. Let's assume that the well is full up to this point. Let's, for the sake of my argument, assume that we know that it will not flood through here. Just bear with me for a moment. We know that it will not come up through here. In order to keep it from coming up the staircase, I've employed a trick in Dwarf Fortress called a pressure regulator. Water filled up to this level, let's pretend this is all full here for a moment, will fill this tile completely, and then it will move diagonally through this area and fill this tile completely. But because it's passed through this diagonal, this is the effective level to which the water will try to rise. It will no longer try, after having moved through this diagonal, to rise up through this staircase. So the next question is, well, wait a minute. How do we assume that the water isn't going to flood up through your wells once you build them? Good question. And the answer is on our input here, right before it arrives in our uh, well proper. We're going to dig another one of those pressure regulators. We're going to excavate out 3 tiles here, 2 tiles here, and 3 tiles here. In fact, we're actually going to go out to 4 tiles wide here, and then we're going to drop back down to our 3 wide tunnel. Now, what we've done here is basically said water's going to come in from this left side here that we're excavating, and it's going to arrive in this set of diagonal chambers here, which forces the water to rise no higher than this pressure on this side. This side over here is still pressurized, but this side is, let's call it safe-ish. It won't come up above -14 unless it's provided another orthogonal access. This thing right here is the key to not flooding your fortresses in an automated fashion. You could set up crazy, bizarre, things involving floodgates and bridges and pressure plates. You can, you can, but I wouldn't. Now, that's great. We've got this hooked up. Let's say the water's going to come in. Well, where's the water going to come from? Well, that's the next phase of this. Okay, now we're going to try something because I haven't tried this before, but our aquifer here is pretty aggressive. Now, it might require us to do this on a few floors, but oop, I need to fix that while I'm thinking about it. There we go. Now, my hope is that we will get enough out of this aquifer that we can drop it down in here and pressurize this. Okay. Now, it may not give us enough water. This is a light aquifer, and it may not be enough to fill up this chamber well. It may be a problem. So if that's the case, then we're going to have to connect it to the stream. But first, I want to give the aquifer a chance because, like we saw with that room over there adjacent that was directly below the aquifer here, all we did was start to dig underneath the pudding stone in that one room, and it started to flood. Lots of water, plenty of water, no problem. Technically a light aquifer, but you wouldn't know it. So, my thinking is we'll set up a bridge here that will allow us to cut off entrance to the well. That will allow us to cut off the water flow if we need to, so we can seal it. And then once this can be sealed, we know we can cut off intake, we know we can drain it, then we can open this up to the aquifer and see if we can actually fill it with just the aquifer. If we can, great. We have an internal water supply, no problem. If not, we can look at touching it up to the well or to the stream. That's still not a problem, it just requires a little more work. But this aquifer is pretty aggressive, so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to make use of it this way. My hope is that by connecting these things up and leaving as much orthogonal connection to stone as possible, we will maximize the rate at which each aquifer layer will deposit its water. I've never actually tested this theory. This will be interesting. But in theory, every stone you'll notice that on these ones that I haven't actually sealed up, I haven't closed the diagonals, but there's no more water weeping out of them. The diagonals don't have to technically be closed. It just looks better if you do, I think. I'm being, well, let's call it OCD about it. Oops, oops, oops. Wait, wait, wait. Wait, wait, wait. Don't you do that yet. I don't want you to finish that yet. Not yet. You guys go on about your merry way for just a second. If that one aquifer level is enough to do this, then we're already going to have problems anyway, but I don't think we're going to have a problem yet. So we're going to slap a bridge in right here. This will be our seal. Now, why a bridge and not a floodgate? Well, the answer is butterfly wings. Floodgates are prone to jamming. If an item is sitting below a floodgate, it will not close. That is to say, if a boulder gets pushed into it, if a sock finds its way into the sewer system, if a butterfly vermin happened to be underneath it this one time when a cat roamed through while the channel was dry, killed the butterfly, left a corpse, and the corpse is laying under your floodgate, that butterfly corpse will prevent your floodgate from closing. Bridges don't have this problem. Bridges do not ask permission, they simply go. So your butterfly corpse gets deposited, and your bridge doesn't care. There's no longer a butterfly corpse there. Your dwarf is screwing around underneath your floodgate, it jams. Your dwarf is screwing around underneath your bridge, the problem solves itself. So I'm going to put a bridge. Bridges also are more resistant to certain things like building destroyers. Man, that aquifer is really trying because there's only like 9 tiles exposed and it's already starting to try and flood us here. As soon as they get that bridge constructed, we'll get that linked up, and then we'll do a little creative excavation on the aquifer layers here. Give me a second here, guys. I'm going to step away for just a moment. Okay, that's fair. Yes, Clinidev does bring up a good point. I'm sorry I didn't mention. Bridges don't work on really large creatures. Your bridge just disintegrates. So if you try to crush the rampaging zombie elephants, you're going to get screwed. If you try to crush a dragon out of existence, it's going to cause you a problem. If your castle drawbridge raises up to form a wall and the dragon has already landed in the middle of the drawbridge, raising it is not going to fix your problem. In fact, it's going to make your problem much, much worse very quickly because the drawbridge will disintegrate into millions of pieces and leave the door wide open. So, if you really want to be super super safe about it, just because you think you might conceivably have zombie elephants rampaging around in your aquifer system at some point, you theoretically should build a second one of these closer to the water source, like if we hook it up to the stream, in order to sever access at multiple points and prevent the issue where your only intake seal is being destroyed. However, if your water supply is coming from an aquifer, as this one is, we don't have to worry about that. Our worry is things like butterfly corpses, socks, and boulders, and all of those things can be crushed out of existence by a bridge with no problem, so we are safe to do it this way. Now, if we have to hook it up to the stream, additional efforts will be required. So, here's the thing on labors. Labors fall for me into two basic categories: crafting labors, where I want to have a specialist do them generally, and hauling labors or non-skilled labors, where I want to do them in parallel because having many dwarves do them means that those jobs are done and out of the way, whereas having a serial dwarf do them one at a time, one at a time, one at a time would mean that they never get done. This is things like hauling after trade goods get traded. I frankly will have every dwarf in the fortress do that because it's faster to have every dwarf drop it and for 5 seconds and get that done than it is to have one dwarf who spends his entire life moving boxes from the trade depot to various stockpiles and never catches up with all your trades because there's constantly more to be moved. Um, Crafting skills need, whenever possible, to be done by someone with high skill. Now, there's a couple of caveats to that. Long term, you're going to want to have all your dwarves having some trade skill that they do, some crafting skill that they do for creative purposes. A dwarf who isn't able to do a crafting skill occasionally will get upset. So, long term, what I will typically do is have my dwarves crank out coins. Coins are not particularly valuable, they can be melted back down into make more metal. Um, they can be traded, they can be split up into individual coins and melted down individually. And I think in the current version, you get more back if you do that than you spent when you made them. So they can be used as a source of metal. Um, and they provide a creative outlet for your dwarves uh, that can be recycled in the event that it's not good. See, the problem with having all your dwarves making macaroni art is that you've got to have somewhere to put the macaroni art when you're done. And the advantage to coins is that you can put the macaroni art back in the smelter and make more macaroni art. Now, beyond that, that's the general outline for me. Now, that said, let's talk about how you can get into this a little more detailedly, let's say. Every dwarf has attributes and a personality, things they like, things they hate, things they want to do, things they don't want to do, things they dream about. If you really want to get precise about labors, you want to pair people up with the labors that they're not only inclined to do, but good at, which means that you have to go through each and every one of those dwarves I've got over there, all of them. Let's see, how many do we have now? 42 dwarves, all 42 of them, and individually assign them to their dream goals. If you want to be the ultimate labor counselor, have at it. However, roles kind of fill in for that a little bit. These are the things the dwarf is best at, or whose attributes currently make them most suited for, might be the better way to think about it. Here's the catch. A dwarf that does a thing will get good at it. Whether he likes it or not, whether it's his ideal labor or not. Yeah, and you don't have to. You don't have to sit down with all 100 dwarves and say, oh, this guy wants to be an ambusher, but I've got 5 other guys who are better at ambushing, so this guy can't. He's going to have to be an architect. You don't have to do that. It's not necessary. It's not necessary to get the fort running. If you want to keep your fortress, if you want to build that ideal dwarven utopia, well, you should be aware of exactly how deep the rabbit hole goes. But let's talk about our dwarves for a moment. Remember, we had our dwarf doctor that we brought in originally, and we got these 2 other guys who are actually much better at it. I mean, this guy's a 14 and our guy's a 3. And this guy is basically best on the continent diagnostician, and our guy is, well, he just graduated his residency. He's a doctor. That guy is house. um, so we could keep our doctor. In fact, we will, because I'm going to have several doctors in case we have a mass medical pileup, as it were. But I didn't look at him to see whether doctoring was really his ideal job. I didn't look at that. But if I look at him now, you'll notice that because he's done it so long, whether it is his ideal job or not, he's worked at it so long and practiced the underlying attributes so hard that he has made himself good at all those things. It's a little like bicep curls. Whether you like bicep curls or not, if you do a lot of bicep curls, you're going to build up your bicep. And that's kind of how dwarven labors and attributes work. When they do the labor a lot, they get good at it. And not only do they get good at it, they develop the things underneath it that make them better at it. So whether they start out good at it or not, they will end up that way. Now, if you want them to get good fast, if you want them to be happiest doing what they're doing, maybe you look a little closer. But this guy, whether he wanted to be a doctor, let's see, look at his personality here. Avoids physical, somewhat fearful, tends to be a little wasteful, but otherwise, there's no. This guy likes competition and prefers a noisy, bustling life, but there's nothing really here about, wants to help people or this isn't somebody who went to become a doctor because he wanted to help people and wanted to be a doctor as such. He's just not really into the martial danger sorts of things, despite being able to handle stress. Okay, and he's just done it so long at this point that he's good at it. He's got those attributes built up, worked on. Now the weird thing is, this guy here is technically a doctor, but his agility is really low. The only skill he hasn't worked on is suturing. I'm wondering if there's a connection here. See, this guy's got a better agility, but low patience, so never practiced on setting bones, I guess. Is friendly, let's see here. Often acts with compassion. So this guy kind of was motivated to become a doctor and still never became as good a doctor as this other one. It, like I said, there's a lot of flexibility here in the sense that Dwarf Fortress is realistic-ish in a sense. This is one of those ways. Sometimes people just get swept up in doing a job and they just get good at it. It never was what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be an astronaut, but now that said, uh, I wouldn't spend a lot of time swapping dwarves around in skills that are crafter skills. Specialize them. While I do coins for everybody, and everybody ends up in metal crafting because that's just what dwarves do because it's easy in my fort. You can just as easily use stone carving and have them all making mugs, or glass making and have them all making goblets. There are other tasks you can do. Metal crafting works for me because the output can be melted back down. Glass making, you could sell the output, and stone carving, it gets rid of all your stone clutter for you. So there are other ways to provide that gross labor drain, if you will, that gross creativity outlet for your dwarves. Um, Beyond that, though, no. You'll see me specialize a handful of dwarves enough that I can make sure that those labors I need are being done. So this is not going to end up being the only smith we end up with, because I'm going to need to be able to make sure that if he's praying to a god or taking a nap or eating a meal or wandering the forest for whatever reason, that somebody else can step in and make my weapons, because damn it, the goblins are coming and we've got to get ready. So we've got our hauler corps that will handle most of our unskilled labor long enough for us to get out from under. So we can turn that off now. We don't need to have those guys doing any tanning anymore, because our kitchen workers are caught up on butchering, and the butchering will kind of be small batches at first. We'll add a couple more kitchen workers before it becomes an issue. It's interesting that our best doctor is also one of our best butchers. I'm just saying. True story. I'm not saying there's a connection. I'm just saying it's the way it works. Yeah, it's one of those things where, okay, so you've got your. Oh, right, we've got those humans sitting in our depot, don't we? Probably should go look at them and make sure they don't have something we want. Um, get out here, Smith boy. We've got work for you. It's one of those things, it's not necessary long term. It's useful. If you find that there's a dwarf who you really can't keep happy, the reality is that there are certain dwarves you just can't keep happy. Some of them can end up with that triple six set of personality traits, as it were, on 3 dice, and just they're a total wreck. The best thing you can do for them is exile them. The faster a bear eats them, the better off everyone will be. Okay, so let's get our dwarves delivering trade goods so that we have something to trade. Somewhere in that there was a bin full of these things too, so that's good. We're starting to get bins in the finished goods stockpile. That reminds me, we don't yet have work, so let's do one. Let's queue up a work order. Bin. Wooden bin. See right there? Construct wooden bin. That's what we're going to do. Go into the job manager, construct a work. We're going to tell him we need to construct, 10 wooden bins. He'll check this daily. Actually, no. I take that back. Let's get rid of that. Let's do better than that. Queue up. Bin. And now let's talk about the conditions. So this will queue up 20 wooden bin jobs. So he'll make 20 bins at a time. But the conditions are going to be add, let's see, we have item type is I, bins is, and then we want to change the inequality, no more than, less than, at most. If we have 200 bins, he'll stop. Now I think that's 200 loose bins, so that's probably a little high, but for right now, we'll let it run and see if he stops. We're we've got plenty of room to store 200 bins. We certainly won't run out of space. Now we do want to change the material here, and this is, oh no, wooden bins, so we don't need to worry about the material. Sorry, wrong thing. We do want to change item type. Oop, no, 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 no. We want to add a condition. Excuse me, my bad. And then go down here and change the item type to log. Number 20. You can't make 20 bins if you don't have 20 logs. He'll let us know if he goes to make bins and he can't. That's it. We've told him construct 20 wooden bins if we have at most 200 and at least 20 logs remaining. We go back out. This job has not been validated yet. Our manager has to work on the job before it will be validated. So let's go check out our offices and see if they're done yet. Still not done. So we need to get our masons working because they ain't getting our job done here. And we'll set up to make a bunch of rock chairs just so we get those finished off. Now, our well. Let's see. We don't have the bridge yet. Not sure this will be. We'll see. Like I said, that aquifer was really nasty when we came down through it. Now, hopefully they'll scoop up all the nice valuable rock in here, but if not, we'll get to show you forbidding and hiding as well. We will simply tell our dwarves that these rocks are taboo. Don't you dare touch the rocks in the well. You do not recognize the rocks in the well. Come on, guys. Okay, let's see what he's got to sell us. Bars, of course, are always useful. The gems can be used. Let's see. I don't have any ropes yet. I might as well buy a few cheap ones. Why not? Lead flasks are cheap. Copper toy. That's a guinea hen goose. Gobbler. We'll just butcher them right away. Let's see what else we got here. I was hoping for seeds, but I didn't see any there. When you say a gold reserve, what do you mean there? What kind of gold reserve? You've got a bunch of gold bars built up? Muckroot seeds. Might as well get those. Wow, no real seeds. That's a shame. Okay, so gold bars can be used for all kinds of things, really. One of the primary things I would tend to use gold bars for is making coins, and the reason I'd make coins is because coins is a good way to level up your. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either, but you could put them to use. And the use to which I would put them would be to make coins or statues, or, I mean, if you're going to flex with them, make gold statues and put the statues in your room. Your dwarves can appreciate the beauty in the statue. And let's see, that's a lot of money there. So let's stop there for a second. Okay, we can carry on now. I mean, yeah, if you're just using it to flex, look at all my wealth. Slap in a statue, slap in a bunch of statues, array them around your theoretical throne, and away you go, right? Um, but as far as other uses to which they can be put, jewelry. Your dwarves will want jewelry to claim rings, earrings, amulets, neck, that kind of stuff. They actually want to be able to claim and wear that stuff. So making some of this stuff's not a bad idea. In fact, I need to set up work orders for this stuff, so we'll get to that in a minute. But gold is highly valuable, so that means they get to claim valuable stuff. They love to be able to claim valuable stuff. That's its own happy thought. Got to claim a valuable, whatever. Um, Gold is a fantastic way to do that. You could, if you wanted to multiply your gold like some sort of dragon rubbing your coins together on a hoard, make a bunch of gold coins. Sell the coins to the trader in stacks of one. We'll do that much later with a macro. I'll show you how. Each coin you sell to the trader, turn around and buy it back. You don't leave him with any of the coins. If you want, you can give him some of them and then, trade the rest back to yourself, basically splitting down your coins a little bit. Don't worry, it'll work out in your favor anyway. If you melt the coins down individually, I'll have to double check, see if it's been fixed, but it used to be the case, and I'm betting it still is, that if you melt the coins down individually, the melt job will actually produce over time more metal than you actually put into the coins, allowing you to multiply your gold bars. Who doesn't like multiplying their gold bars? So let's get some cheese too. We've got that milk I need to make into cheese too, as I recall. Some sheets of parchment. Yay. Buy those two. Why not? Okay, so he needs some more money. That should do. No, really? You're not going to do that? Are you serious? Oh, fine. I don't really need all of it. Keep your cheese. There we go. Okay. And we no longer need somebody to trade. So now they're taken care of. They can do their thing. Our tavern is still populating chairs and tables. That's where all this stuff is going so far. Okay. Well, there's another use. I mean, the coins themselves have trade value. I mean, they're actually have their own value. Not as legal tender. That is to say, you don't mint a coin that's worth 50 dwarf bucks, but the gold coins themselves have their value as a coin. That is to say, one gold piece or whatever, and then that's multiplied by their one dwarf buck or whatever, and then that's multiplied by their material value. So gold coins actually work out to be fairly valuable. Um, Steel coins would be even more valuable. I mean, if you're really going to get there, you could go all Dragonlance on the thing, and everybody's making coins out of iron and steel because that's what that's what's valuable. But see, that's the best part, Wooms. You've got to understand, you throw the gold coins out there, and they may make 300 coins, and you bought back 600 coins, and the 600 coins you melt down end up being all the 300 you sold to them in terms of metal, all the 300 you sold to them, and all the 600 you got back, and then like another 50 times as much. When I say that you multiply them in this case, if you really go through all the effort to break them down to individual coin stacks, I want to say the return on investment is something like 5,000%. 50 coins per each. So it's sort of like dwarven alchemy rather than dwarven metalsmithing. No, no, don't melt it down, man. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying melt it down to melt it down. That's not the point. You melt it down to make more of it, and use more of it to make more stuff with it. Golden statues everywhere. All your dwarves rocking golden jewelry everywhere. Crowns, earrings, necklaces, amulets, you name it. All of it, the whole 9 yards. Gold statues, gold furniture. You got gold studs on your gold furniture? You do now. You got sand on this. You got sand on this site of yours. You got plenty of glass you can make. Gold studded glass goblets. Go for it. Even if the trader's bringing, you can't afford it. We're going to war over the gold you brought us that we refuse to allow you to leave with. That's our gold now. You show that thing goal. Show him. Show him who's boss. Our offices are just about to be finished here. I can see them putting the tables in. We still need the chairs before we can officially make them offices, though. Just a few more chairs and we'll be in business. See, now from my standpoint, especially back in older versions, would have been, yeah, welcome the elves in. They bring animals. I want trained desert scorpions. Alas, removed. It's a shame. Watching your trained desert scorpions race down and beat invaders with their own weapons was just absolutely hilarious. I'm pretty sure we're loaded with gold and iron here. The problem is going to be, here's the problem for us. Our iron is actually in all the layers where the fucking aquifer is. To get to it means digging the wet out. And so we're going to have a drainage system for our mines, or we are going to be. Now, see, that's the thing. I never actually went to war with the elves on that map. I never did. And the reason was they brought me animals that I could force into a breeding program and use as war animals. And as long as they were willing to keep me supplied, I was willing to keep trading. Bring me more, and I'll use them against my enemies. We'll have a working arrangement here. The reality is, if you don't embark somewhere where an animal is native, if you don't embark in a savanna where there are elephants, you're never going to see elephants. You're never going to get them unless you trade for them. Um, so if you intend to be the dwarven fort that domesticated elephants for your civilization, if you intend to be uh, raising war bears and having them, in a pasture out front to deal with goblins who get a little uppity. If your goal is to have a tavern that's full of dancing bears who tear people apart the moment that they actually start misbehaving, then you're gonna need animals that you're not probably going to have. That's the catch. You could wait forever, and if your site doesn't have those animals, you're just never going to see them. And the best way to get animals generally is going to be to trade them with the elves. Um, it's not the only way. Sometimes the humans will bring you animals, but they tend to bring you domesticated sorts that you already have. Ditto with the dwarves. If they haven't domesticated it already, they're not bringing it to you. The elves have a menagerie somewhere, apparently, that they're breeding all their animals from. They go out into the forest and whistle on a flute for a bit, and the animals just line up for the cage, I guess. Oh, yes, our offices are done. So depending on it really comes down to what you want. If that's not something you care about, there's nothing that says you can't just run war dogs and call it good. Let's see. This is our. Let's see. Which one was our. I don't have a dedicated noble for this yet. So who was our manager? He is Shorast a support, and our bookkeeper is Tossid a support. Okay, so now we have offices for our bookkeeper and our manager. Now we can now we can now we can set the settings on our record keeper. First off, that's the first thing we need to talk about. So the bookkeeper is a little special. He's the only one down here that has these settings we have to mess with. How much precision you ask your bookkeeper to do determines how accurate he makes his count. Now, if he is a dedicated noble who does nothing but bookkeeping all day long, he will have no problem maintaining highest precision. Oh no, no, no! I'm not criticizing that sedimentary iron is realistic. It is, but we settled where there's pudding stone, dude. Pudding stone. It's all aquifer everywhere now, and not just little aquifer. It's pretty aggressive for a light aquifer. Um, so our bookkeeper, we're going to put him to work making highest precision. Now, what this means is, let's talk about what this chart means. If you have him set to medium precision here, yeah, and if he's a dedicated bookkeeper, all counts accurate is what you should be doing because he's got all the time in the world, so you might as well use it. But let's say you don't. Let's say you want to keep him reasonably accurate, but you don't care about counting every stone in your fortress. Lower levels of precision are certainly viable, and the bookkeeper will have more idle time to do other things or to have other things that he's doing in between bookkeeping sessions. Remember, bookkeeping is a lower priority task, so if he's doing other things, those other things take priority and he's not doing the bookkeeping. If he doesn't do the bookkeeping, then his counts start to fall back off and he has to recount at some point. Highest precision is certainly viable for a dedicated bookkeeper, no problem, no questions asked. But if you go down, there is no such thing as getting coins for trade unless they actually trade you the item that says coin. The dwarf buck indicator down there is effectively a value indicator only. So if you are trading 820 dwarf bucks worth of stuff for no items, you're effectively giving up 820 dwarf bucks worth of stuff. Coins actually are an actual item. They'll comes in stacks of 50 and you can actually parcel them out as little single items. And if you bother to go through that effort, like I said, we'll show you. It's there's a trick there and it's nice. It's beautiful. And I honestly hope it's one of those last things that Toady worries about because I see developers constantly freaking out about, let's call them infinite wealth bugs for the lack of a better word. And that's like the last thing I would worry about. Now, don't forget, Wooms, it's better if you melt the coins individually. If you melt the stacks, that's fine. You still get more back, I think, that way than you put in, but not as much. It's not 50 to 1 at that point. I think it's like 1.2 to 1. So precision counts. What does this mean? So it means that on medium precision, anything that's less than 100 up to 2 digits will be counted identically, exactly. Anything up to 3 digits will be counted exactly. At 4 digits, he'll start rounding at the nearest third digit. And at 5 digits, you'll still be rounding at the nearest third digit. And then it's the fourth digit, and then it's at that point, everything is all the way down. So by default, your bookkeeper is keeping lowest precision. He has question marks on everything, and at best, you're within a count of 10. And as the things get larger, your counts get less and less accurate. Likewise, these similar precisions work the same way, but they force accurate counts on the lower levels of count. So maybe you have 70 weapons that are counted exactly, and you have 700 meals that are counted exactly, but your 7,000 stones are just an estimate. And your 70,000, I don't know, forks, whatever, are a really, inaccurate estimate, and it gets more and more accurate as you estimate. Now, for our dedicated guy, highest precision, and away we go. They have to have an office to work in order to do their jobs. So remember, when we were looking at this job, this wasn't validated before. The manager hasn't had a chance to do anything with it. Now we've told him, hey, you've got a job. So now he may be off doing other things, hauling or the like. So we need to make sure that somebody, more migrants, good, good. We'll let them come in and do their thing here for a second. We'll just let them arrive for a second. Go down here and check on our, need to set up hotkeys. So our bookkeeper has started to work on, I think, there. Let's make sure he's not doing anything else. Because I see a distinct lack of people actually doing stuff at the moment. Oh, hey, we've got a guy who's a competent organizer. Congratulations, you just became manager. And you weren't doing anything but hauling, so you just became our record keeper. Cool. Rovad and Ushat. Okay. Now, I want these guys primarily doing their job. Now, that's going to leave them with a lot of idle time, unfortunately. That's just the way nobles work. I could theoretically micromanage their labor down a little bit and give them other things to do, but I want to make sure that they're available to approve jobs fairly often, so I want to keep their list of jobs fairly small. Now we've got doctors, but we need to get them a hospital. All right, so good news, bad news. No, not muted. I was just running through. Bilan is basically a lot of the metals are basically useful only for decorative purposes. So making statues, coins, that kind of thing. Um, Realistically, the metals I care about most are going to be, your weaponable metals. That is to say, copper, bronze, iron, steel. Technically silver in some cases. Um, but primarily you're going to be looking at decorative stuff. Um, you can make statues out of it. You can make hatches out of it. You can make grates out of it. If your metal crafters are skilled, at that point, making things out of metal actually becomes worthwhile because a lot of the metals have moderate to high uh, innate values, which, when multiplied by the craftsman's high skill output, yields a much more valuable item, which improves the value of things like your temples and your taverns. So your guild hall requires X number of dwarf bucks of value at each tier of support. In fact, I need to double check. Do we have might be getting to the point where we need the miners guild now, I'm thinking, because we may have 10 people now. Okay, guys, here's the deal. It is a little after 10 o'clock here now, so it's about time for me to knock off for this evening. But we're going to pick up here tomorrow at about 7 p.m. Eastern again. And we're going to do this again from now until game day on November 6th, where we'll do a 24-hour live stream. Silver is heavy and dense, and so makes a decent hammer. Yes, that's correct. Blunt weapons, maces, and hammers. So, before I go, any questions? If not, let's see who's out there who might be available for our raid this evening. Oh, how about a significantly larger streamer tonight? All right, why not? Oh, I need to fix that. Oh, all right, guys, I will see you back here tomorrow night. In the meantime, off for some more Dwarf Fortress.